Echo.
Aloha.
Aloha. Mahalo.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome. I hope you've had a wonderful evening. It's kind of a capper to the weekend right now, and it's been so many amazing faces, so many beautiful experiences. It's nice to link up in person, and we're really excited to bring to you Regenerative Hemp tonight and talk to you about how hemp can save the world not only through medicine but through intentional cultivation. And we have three wonderful people up here that are going to share their experience and their intentions on their farm and beyond.
Yeah, go ahead. Dave Sullivan.
Well, thanks for sticking around, guys, and listening to us talk. And thanks, Josh and Kelly, for inviting us to be on this panel. My name is Dave Sullivan, and thank you guys for sticking around. My name is Dave Sullivan. I own Sweetleaf Organic Farm, which is a certified organic farm, along with The Plant, which is a recreational marijuana farm. We're located outside of Eugene, Oregon, in the farming community of Junction City. And we manage about 100 acres of ground that includes forests, woodlands, riparian zones, wetlands, and a heck of a lot of Class 1 farm soil. We generally have about 20 to 30 acres in production annually. And we employ 18 people year-round, including 5 families. And over the years, we've developed a style of farming that incorporates cannabis into its long-term fertility program, soil building program, and crop rotation program. And we've had a lot of success having that be one of our key crops, intermingled amongst our other fruit and vegetable crops.
Thanks, Dave. I wanted to echo my thanks for everyone who stuck around. I know it's been a long weekend, and it's nice to see everybody here. My name is Matt Davenport. I'm the founder and CEO of ARLO Systems. I also own a company called Cliffside Hemp Supply. We're a supply chain management and logistics company that supports domestic and international markets at this point. I'm a permaculture designer. I've spent my time and career applying permaculture design to cannabis cultivation. My passion's really just evolved into working how I can to scale indoor and full sun operations, really. So my work in hemp, I was a certified hemp farmer in 2016, 2017 out of Colorado, and ran that farm for a year, went to scale. We had to pull out of the drought back, I think it was 2017, 2018. We had a really bad drought in Colorado, and that was it just caused a lot of farmers to pull out, some not to be very successful as a result of that. So finding a problem out of that solution, I built that supply chain management company I referred to, and we've been just working with farmers to help them solve problems in the movement of their hemp, one way or another, from biomass, flour, post-refined goods, seeds, and really helping educate farmers who are both, conventional farmers shifting crops, conventional farmers just looking to shift to organic, and then working with organic farmers looking to shift beyond to regenerative agricultural practices. So thanks again for being here.
Hey, everybody. I'm Daniel Richardson. I'm co-owner and CEO of Lane Creek Hemp Company. We're in Jackson County, Oregon. And we got a 40-acre spread down there, and we're growing an acre of hemp in like a 2-acre cultivation zone, growing it in hugel berms and very intensive perennialized system, no store-bought nutrients whatsoever. We're managing like 9 cows, a bunch of sheep, a bunch of livestock, and rotating them around, and just trying to work with the land and create nutrient bases in that way. And yeah, it's been a really, really exciting project, and just getting into the roots of the land and what a land steward can really do on a piece of property with the right ingredients. with great sun, great water, great soil, and animals and humans, like how that symbiotic relationship happens. And yeah, just trying to do our best in this tumultuous hemp scape, which has been a really, really interesting project, and super excited to see where it goes. But yeah, just trying to lead by example and just ensure that we're building topsoil and that we're keeping fish happy and we're keeping wildlife happy, and we're just trying not to grow fence to fence, and understanding that the network of fertility is so it kind of circles around us as the land steward, as the human, but you have to this whole regenerative model is different for everybody, and it's just like it's this mindset of you have to compromise some profit, and you have to compromise some of your needs to allow your land to thrive, and just trying to create nucleuses of fertility and linking them up, and that's where systemic fertility really comes from. So just trying to like I didn't grow up doing this. I was a heavy civil construction background and got into the farming world, and so now I'm going down this path, and it's just it's a great canvas to work with.
For the first time, probably in over 200 years, North America is seeing a huge increase of young farmers. Young farmers are very interested in buying land. They want to know how to farm it in a way that's responsible, because hemp and cannabis has got their attention. And this is really exciting, and I believe that we have this wonderful opportunity to give, to hire and give alternatives and be more creative to big ag. And while this plant is an incredible regenerator, it is a remediator, it can feed the world, it can give fiber to us and can give us medicine, there's still, as this hemp industry ramps up, there is a lot of people doing it still big ag style. And there's some real problems, and I wanted to talk a bit about those and go through, and you all tell me about the solutions that you have for them. And one that we're seeing is thousands of acres underneath plastic mulching, is what they call it, which is basically planting the plants and putting layers of plastic over thousands of acres. And that's not going to regenerate the land or the waterways at all. It's a horrible environmental disaster. So it's our responsibility as regenerative hemp farmers to change that reality and get the education out. So I'd love to hear from you all about some really good solutions to that.
Well, that being said, for us, I feel like a lot of people in this room that probably have experience or have dedicated their lives to ganja, what it was like for me, as a teenager and learning how to grow crops and learning how to grow weed, looking to like people that were older for us that had success, we were told you couldn't get chunky killer yields of sticky buds without using bottled synthetic nutrients. Or once you have spider mites, the only way you're going to get rid of them was Avid or Floramide or whatever other toxic bullshit was being pushed on people. So that being said, not wanting to go down that road, we would have our pen and paper and listen to our elders who were able to pull off killer ganja without using any of those inputs. So I'm seeing the same thing happen with plastic right now, where people are being told that the plants won't size up in time, or you won't be able to manage weeds, or water retention, whatever the reason is. And I can tell you from experience, and with lots of crops over the years, that the Willamette Valley is not an ideal climate to grow cannabis. You have to be on it, and there's a lot of nuances that are the difference between make and break, and you do not need plastic mulch to go killer high-quality cannabis, hemp, CBD, any of it. So we have found a really good alternative. I'll just kind of nuts and bolts our style. I think that to start off in any industry, especially farming, especially cannabis, starting small is key. Learn your plants, learn your crew, learn your land, get it all work together. There's no rush. Anytime I jump ahead and try to grow 2 acres of onions versus 1, I get tennis ball onions instead of softball size onions. It's the same exact thing for cannabis. That being said, I think one person with a strong back and a strong will with a green thumb can manage about an acre is the threshold, hands-on, especially when it comes to weeds, which while on the topic of plastic mulch. We're a bit bigger than that. We did about 12.5 acres of high CBD this year in 1 to quarter acre to half acre, 2 acre plots, all kind of scattered around our chessboard over all of our properties. And just nuts and bolts how we got it done. Some of it was direct seeded, some of it was transplanted. Then after the first round of weeds come up, when the plants are established, we come through with hose, wheel hose, hand weeds, secondary. First of us, we're slightly mechanized. So the old school tractors like the Alice Chalmer Gs and the Farmall Cubs, these things were built to last forever and they had multiple functions. But we'll come down and literally drive on our tractor and knock down the weeds in row with basket weeders. We come by a second time with finger weeders, which will smother the in-row weeds, and then our crew just comes through hands and hose like the ground troops, knocking back what the tractors couldn't knock down. Then, if we can time it right, and timely cultivation is key in any farming operation, the second round we can get away with no hand weeding and just have our finger weeders just smother the in-row weeds. And then we follow that up with a combination of cover crops, ideally grass, a ryegrass or an annual grass. And we're really digging a New Zealand white clover for ganja in particular. The reason I like the white clover is that it grows really short, so it doesn't kind of choke your understory canopy. And also, it is more drought tolerant. So we water it in overhead, and once it's established, it can take foot traffic. So in our aisles, we can walk all over it, and we won't smother it. And it can take less irrigation, and it'll still thrive. Then we find if you can get that clover, not turn it until the following late spring, early summer, after it's flowered, the amount of nitrogen boost you get from flowered New Zealand clover is choke. You can't even believe how much it builds up your soil. So those are all alternatives. Not only are we creating an environment for beneficial insects and habitat and choking out all the competing weed species, but we're also creating a natural living mulch that's an alternative to plastic mulch. And in my experience, I think gives you a much superior end product.
We're building soil.
And we're building soil. Exactly. And one more thought, the grass combined with the clover, the reason for that, clover is a lot slower to germinate, and a lot of times your next round of weeds will just choke it out, where your grasses can kind of come up immediately and choke out all the invasive weed species that were already there and all your broadleaf grasses and weeds. And then after that's established, you mow that back and your clover comes through, and then by this time of the year, all you see is fields of clover.
Thank you. Thank you. Matt?
Appreciate that. So I think to address the plastic mulch thing, we really just have to ask ourselves what problems are farmers having with, the approach to setting up farms. And most of the time, what I found, I work directly with and oversee probably about 13, 14 farms all over the country. And a lot of them are and this is by nature of just the demand for the market, hopping into the season in the spring. They're seeing the dollars, they're seeing the green rush, they're seeing the need to just get to market, get plants in the ground. And they're ultimately missing the boat on the reality that to go towards, for example, an organic no-till methodology, which is a great solution for broad scale hemp cultivation that's on relatively flat land. They're missing the boat on planting those cover crops in the fall. So really one of the best advices that I have to people that are looking to get into farming or looking to really get into this large-scale organic no-till thing, with regeneration as sort of the long-term end goal. It's really to start your design work, June, August, September of the year before. Work with land where you're able to have fallow fields, where you're able to leave places for plants to continuously occupy the ground, because at the end of the day, the big takeaway with cover crops is that you really want to treat them as with as much love as you do the crops that generate your sort of primary source of income. Again, if we look through the lens of permaculture and different sustainable and regenerative methodologies, simply sourcing your livelihood off of one plant, one stream of revenue, and on a sort of financial monoculture, it begs the question of whether that's holistic in and of itself. So assuming we have the ability to do the right kind of design work, the foresight to be able to start designing the year before, the concept, and it's going to vary from region to region, but the general concept is you're planting a hairy vetch or a rye somewhere, depending on your zone, from as early as end of August to generally no later than October 15th. You're planting a type of cover crops that are really going to grow up over winter, and then in the fall or in the spring, you're going to use certain implements that have been designed by the Rodale Institute. And if anybody really wants to go deep into organic no-till, I'd suggest you really studying the work that the Rodale Institute has put out there. They have free designs for what are called roller crimpers, which are the basis for how to actually create long-term mulch for these organic no-till systems, which, again, technically speaking, they're not no-till, right? So most no-till farmers are doing single passes at the beginning of the year, and then they're doing another pass to harvest at the end of the year. So as you sort of look at the season on a cycle, you're planting your cover crops in the fall. You're buying or you're making what's called a roller crimper, which is the idea of taking a ryegrasses, and with this really a big metal cylindrical tool with what they call a chevron pattern, you're able to actually roll this thing. You put it on the front of the tractor, and this is in the spring. So again, I'm trying to keep the cycle going, but you plant it in the fall. In the spring, you plan on rolling and crimping your crop. So you put this roller crimper on the front of the tractor, and then usually you have to do 2 passes. Usually you'll plant, for generally speaking, a winter rye and then a hairy vetch. The first pass, the rye will go down, and then generally speaking, sometimes the hairy vetch will pop back up. So you have to do another pass with the roller crimper. And on the back of the tractor is where your planting implements are planted. So the idea is that the roller crimper rolls what's called residue to the ground, and then on the back of the tractor there, basically disc cutters that split the residue, spread it apart just enough for you to be able to get a cutting or seed start in there, and then behind the tractor on that same implement, you're running behind and planting accordingly. So I think that's one solution for broad scale agriculture. You're able to certainly reduce your passes. And when it comes down to it, if you have the ability to do the foresight and design, should eliminate at scale plastic mulch. Also, the big takeaway for organic no-till is most of it isn't necessarily organic. So you got to make sure that you're following a biological pathway to it. A lot of organic no-till farmers are still spraying, or no-till farmers are spraying glyphosates, D4, and all sorts of chemicals, herbicides on their crops.
Thank you. That's awesome. And Daniel, can you maybe add what kind of foods you might be able to plant within your, part of your system?
Yeah, absolutely. In any fertile environment, there's going to be a lot of growth, and in our firm no-till environment, we're come grass season, it's just unbelievable what happens in those hugel berms. I mean, we got chest deep grass by 420, and trying to deal with all that, and like you're looking at this this gardenscape that you're approaching to plant your annual into, and it is just fully thick with annual grasses and perennials. But that's a great thing, you just have to manage those properly. And so we do a lot of like just stepping on the grass and just like getting, what was that word you used?
Residue.
The residue, thank you. I didn't know that one. Yeah, making the residue, and so you're prioritizing. You're pulling up annuals and you're chopping, dropping all of your perennials to just create space for your annual. But we have a ton of potatoes and onions and garlic in our system because everything's got to eat. We have a lot of rodents. We have a lot of moles and voles and all of these things, and everything needs to eat. So we found that potatoes with the hemp has been a lifesaver. They come up and they create this great canopy.
The loving potato.
What's that?
We love potatoes.
Oh my God, they're just delicious too. It's like they're everywhere, and it's like, ooh, I'll take some of that. Onions everywhere. So it's a fabulous way to just think about it. Mulch for us is grass and is material that's grown ideally right in place. We do import a lot of rye straw and wood chips. We run a lot of wood chips, and just to squelch those springtime grasses to like create space to plug your annuals in. And as the summer extends, then those annuals those grasses become less prevalent. But man, in the spring, you gotta do your due diligence to get those grasses down.
I love it, and you're able to use fungi and garden giants to eat those grasses, and that creates a filter, so all the water that's coming over the ground is filtered through that system, and so you're a positive impact on the environment. Dave, did you have something you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, our approach on like a production foods farm is we initially in cannabis days or medical days, we would our first year we would do cannabis in a greenhouse and follow up the second year. And one thing that about cannabis versus a lot of other crops, it's a heavier feeding crop. So it kind of, once it gets rolling, as most of you guys know, it kind of gets that feed me Seymour vibe, and you can throw everything at it and it's going to love it up. That being said, whatever your agricultural practices are, if you're building your own fertility and having your own animals for manure and doing green manures and composting, or you're bringing in amendments and inputs, ideally regionally, if not locally, for ganja and cannabis and hemp, it's all the same plant, obviously, we're really throwing everything we have at it. So then year 3 and year 4, where we initially had those things, planting other food crops, we find we get really high yields, really bountiful crops that are super healthy with 0 additional inputs. So it's Kelly talking about a lot of young folks just getting into farming for the first time, and cannabis bringing them in the farm. It's a really good first year crop. And as most people know here, the whole philosophy behind crop rotations is that different families of crops have different disease pressures, different pest pressures, and uptake different nutrients from the soil. So the monocropping system, where as far as you can see, having a crop grown year after year, the same crop, and then eventually those depletions are going to lead to imbalances, and that's where the heavy artillery of fungicides and fumigants and insecticides come into play. But smaller scale, throw as much diversity as you can, and just having this giant chessboard where you're playing a shell game with the pests and diseases. Cannabis is a really good first year crop to segue into other food production, and we've had a lot of success with it. That was kind of my allure to get into hemp to begin with, and seeing that we could have kind of bigger tracks for bigger other tracks down the road and kind of have bigger squares on our chessboard, if you will.
And also, one thing I wanted to add is that with plastic mulching, we're really looking at monoculturing, like you all were talking about, and polyculture is incredibly important right now as we're looking at the hemp aphid. Anybody who's growing hemp or anybody who's growing cannabis is starting. If you haven't had this pest in your garden, you will. It's coming for you. It's here to stay. It's incredibly healthy, and our cannabis populations are feeding them. We need to be very vigilant in taking care of them, and one way that we can do that, and it really is the only way to do that, is through polyculture, is inviting in massive amounts of predators to take care of those aphids. They're really delicious, they're soft, they're sweet, they taste like cannabis. If they're sucking our cannabis plants, they're super nutritive, and there's a massive amount of predator bugs that live on all of our pollinator plants that love to eat them up. So, and I wanted to move right into a big question about hemp right now, and regenerative hemp, which seems to be the really hot topic, is scaling. You know, there's this conversation, and oh, you can only scale this many acres and be regenerative, or you can only scale this many acres, or what do you all feel about what's scalable in your eyes for regenerative hemp?
I would say, ultimately, if you can have everything coming off your farm, I mean, that would be the ideal situation where a portion of your farm was wild, a portion of your farm made hay, a portion of your farm had weeds and grew, nutrients for any teas you might need, or different mulches, or maybe it's flowers for the pollinators. And in my perfect scaled world, the farm is part of an intact environment where there's trees around, there's birds flying through, there's flowers happening, and in that the hemp is thriving and it's filtering the soil. And I think that can be done, to put a number on it, who knows, 10 to 20 acres or anything. There are some really good examples out there of 700 and 1,000 acre plots where they're doing roller crimping stuff, and I think that can be really beneficial. I think anyone who's trying to who's enabling the environment to thrive while they're creating medicine, that's going to be beneficial. But I think in large scale production, we should probably do rows of flowers through it. We should figure out ways to do like one row of hemp and maybe berries through, or some, just alternate your crops throughout the thing, because that diversity really is going to help you with the hemp aphids. And so that's what I'm thinking at the moment.
Well, for me, I feel like it has a lot to do with your location. For example, the amount of tomatoes you can grow in Quebec is not going to be the same amount that you can grow in Southern California. The eastern shelf of Colorado that's dry is a lot more appropriate for scale. But I also think that, the economy of scale has everything to do with your experience and the crew that you're working with. So, if you have a dream team crew of experienced people that are working together for a long time, and you're appropriately, small scale mechanized, I think the sky can kind of be the limit, as long as your same principles don't get compromised the larger you get in size. And I think one really good thing that kind of tying the what is regenerative when it comes to scale, and what you were saying about the planning ahead and the season ahead, I think a good mantra for any business, and especially in farming, especially in cannabis farming, one thing that I like to think of is the 7 Ps, if you haven't heard of this. The 7 Ps is proper planning and preparation prevent piss-poor performance. So if you can have your 7 Ps in line with your principles, I'm of the opinion that the sky is the limit, because really, in shifting the paradigm for a utopia with a lot of little micro farms over there, and then the people that have the biggest impact, that are taking the most acreage up, You know, even if it's a watered down USDA version of organic versus what we think is organic, these big players, that's that many less millions of barrels of shit that they're putting in our environment and waterways every year. So the balance of us finding new solutions without alienating the bigger growers is part of the work we have to do, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I was just speaking to a colleague, and just our ability to convert farmers from heavily chemical glyphosate-ridden parcels to, you know, more conscious cultivation simply by shifting one crop in their lives. You'd be surprised at how quickly a corn farmer will grow, will shift their crops, grow organically and without pesticides, simply because, you know, they're seeing the market value of this crop. So I think the conversion rate is super important. I mean, we're talking 285,000 acres that were licensed this year, up from 78,000 last year. You know, and so when we start talking about regeneration, we need to start really talking about carbon sequestration and the lack thereof in the way that we're farming this reductionist style cannabinoid paradigm, which is not the way our forefathers and our ancestors thought about hemp. You know, when we're talking about asexual propagation, feminization, however it's done, I think no matter what, we're playing God in a certain way. And when we start to create these single lines of revenue, that alone, I think, begs the question of really how can we get to the endpoints that are on both ends, that are on both sides of me here. I think regeneration is a process. I think we have so many lifetimes of work to do that if we ever get satisfied or comfortable with how regenerative we are, I think we're fucked. And I think the reality is that we need to keep pushing the edge, keep pushing ourselves forward, and modeling people like this to look to examples and solutions. Scale is the name of the game. Right now, we can't keep up with the good intentions and the conscious farming. We can't keep up with the scale at which people are tilling. I mean, I'm talking 13 passes a year. Imagine 13 plus, right? I mean, on conventional farms, it's to a point where to keep it simple, I think we just have to, you know, ask ourselves how much carbon are we really sequestering, period, and then go from there, start reverse engineering it. But perennialized systems, true industrial hemp for fiber, food, fuel, oil, you know, that's I think what's going to really push everyone to a more regenerative 25,000 uses for this plant, which is not what we're doing right now. So.
Oh, well said, man. Scale's a really tricky one. It depends on your end goal, and you know, like Dave said, your location, super important. I watched a balloon absolutely deflate around us in Southern Oregon. It was hard to watch. You know, scale is a super tricky one. If the sky's the limit, that's great. But you know, we need to really step back and like understand what our needs are from this plant and utilize its potential. But you know, it has so much great potential. Hemp has this unbelievable ability to, and you know, if we're going to grow it in the Emerald Triangle and we're going to service, you know, a huge portion of the world, then it could be really intensive on our watersheds and our topsoil. And if we're growing an annual on plastic mulch and we're not remineralizing the soil in a proper manner, it's going to be bad, you know. So we have to really think about what we're doing here. And you know, the beautiful thing about, like Kelly said, you know, all these young people are not necessarily young, but just we have a new seed, we have a new ability to take we have a great opportunity in front of us, and it's like, where are we going to go with it? Like literally, where are we going with it? We have a chance to be very cognizant of our impacts, or we could just be profit mongers and just keep planting way more than we have any idea what we're going to do with it. And you know, that's not necessarily that's what happened, but there was portions of that happened, and people really got humbled this year. And I hope that we all just can be transparent with each other and communicate and be honest with what our scale really needs to be. It's important. If you don't have anywhere to put it, probably shouldn't grow it. So, I mean, it's kind of common sense stuff, but it's very exciting to get into it. It's very exciting to get into it. It's a great opportunity, but like, and just because your neighbor's running mulch doesn't mean you have to. So let's communicate and let's just be honest with, what we need from this plant, and it's definitely a balance, and we're teetering. So we need to be careful.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting that, we don't have an idea of what successful scaling is, because anything in our recent history has not shown successful scale. Big agriculture, the way that it is right now, is not successfully scaling anything. The food is becoming depleted, our waterways, all the things that we know about. And the other thing that I was thinking is that as far as scaling goes, I really like the idea of many farmers, big land. One farmer, 15, 25 acres, and a whole lot of collective people working together. And this is a model that I think could really keep intact integrative systems that are, more diverse with nature. The next question that I wanted to ask you all, and we really don't have a lot of time, and this is such a hot topic that I feel like it actually could be another hour to 2 hours, which is seed feminization. And now hemp has forced us to look at, when we talk about scale, feminizing seeds, and there's people that feel a lot of different ways about it. So I thought I wanted to bring it up to you all. We don't have much time, and maybe we could give some food for thought, or even ask a question if we don't have answers to this.
What I know about it is that silver thiosulfate is one of the common compounds used to make feminized seeds, and it is a toxic compound, and if overused can get into the waterways. And I think that in our farming, what we do with the peer certification and all the farms that we work with is we just don't want to support through our actions any use of any harmful compounds. And so if that's going to be a harmful compound, we don't want to use it. Feminization really isn't a regenerative practice because it's feminized, it's not something you can breed with to move forward. So that part right there, genetically may not be the best thing, but efficiency-wise, in a field setting, I think feminization can make a lot of sense. It is a way of stabilizing genetics for medicine, which is ultimately going out to the betterment of people, and that's really important to us. With the Dragonfly Earth Medicine Pure Certification, we had an amazing gathering at the Heartwood Sanctuary this last weekend, and we are working on putting together some guidelines on what we think is regenerative for hemp, and feminized seed is part of it. And one of the things we talked about was if we did use feminized seed on our land, that maybe we still kept a portion of our land for regular seed breeding. And that regular seed breeding and having, the ability to breed is really important for our future. And with the laws changing, which is a whole other hour and another subject with, how do we even plan for hemp in the future when we don't know what the government's going to do in another 6 months? That's kind of ridiculous. And also there's a ratio of CBD and THC that with these new laws changes everything. But seeds is really important to consider, and we've come up, with the concept of the 7, we didn't come up with the concept, but we resonate with the concept of 7 generations. So, if you're gonna use feminized seeds, you should maybe offset it some other way.
Well, I think seed breeding in general is a hot topic, because on the ganja scene, if it doesn't fill up the whole room when you crack the jar and test over 25%, you toss it. So we're quickly becoming like the Amish with our whole gene pool. So it's going to be a slippery slope in the hemp game as well. But at the same time, hemp's in its infant stage. And any farmer or any business, getting on the board and just even the very basics of making ends meet and being able to continue to do what you're doing as your systems improve, then it's every farmer's or every person's responsibility to keep paring it down and keep getting better at it with less inputs. So I think it's too early and the jury's still out on the feminized hemp seed game. And I think that as the industry evolves and breeding evolves, because cannabis and all ganja, cannabis, hemp, it's all in its infant stage as far as stable F1s across the board. So as it unfolds, we'll learn. But I think it's too early to say you can do this and you can't do that, because it's hard enough to just get out on the field as it is right now.
I think that's a great point. Quick flashback. I mean, feminized seeds in general in the hemp industry are a relatively new thing, and I think the reality is we've seen it as one of the unique tools to scale. And I think if we start looking at the way for personal heroes of mine, such as Mark Shepard, Eric Tonesmeyer, Darren Doherty, I think if we ask them if feminized seeds could fit into regenerative agriculture, I mean, I'd venture to say they probably would just start laughing. And so I think in general, is feminization something that we find in nature? I can't exactly point to a place. In terms of the ethylene blockers that are used to achieve feminization, there are about 11 known ethylene blockers. The one that Josh was talking about at the MSDS is 24,000 milliliters per liter for it to be quote unquote toxic to environment. So I think the levels to which people are applying these compounds to me is second to whether they're using them or not, using feminization as sort of a leverage point to regeneration, or if they're able to do things without feminization. So for me, if I can grow crops without that kind of technology, that's my preference. I think for farmers that have a desire, a need, an ability to scale, it's been really the solution for acreage 10, 20, 40 acres and above. So I hope to see feminization become a safer process, but I think anything to keep CRISPR tech, Surtech, any of these genetic editing and genetic modifying technologies out of these gene pools is, to me, first and foremost. I think it's a big deal. So
Thank you.
Great point. There's something systemically uncomfortable for me about the fact that I save seed from every other thing on my farm, but every year we have to buy new hemp seed. But it's just the climate that we're in, and it's brand new. We're all moving forward, and we have great momentum in an awesome direction. So at this point, there's something uncomfortable about that portion of it for me. But I know that we have so many good minds and so many good hearts putting energy in really good directions that I'm confident that there's a future for us growing hemp. I'm trying to make it like 1/6 of what I think about, and I'm trying to diversify my farm and diversify my financial landscape, because it could just go like that, and then all of a sudden it's no longer not necessarily viable, but just hard to prioritize. So I'm excited that we're all pooling together, and we need to continue to unify and use our resources and just keep moving in the right direction.
Thank you. And I would add, ultimately, using male and female regular seeds is the ultimate goal. And there are field test kits that farmers can get, and it does make sense to start, all your male and female, regular seeds, and then sex test all of them and then in that you can do a mega pheno hunt. And really, in hemp has shown us, CBD is the talk right now, but CBG has been grown this year, and maybe it's CBDV next year, and THCV, that the hemp has the ability to harbor cannabinoids. And then that, brings on the subject of hemp as industrial hemp, or hemp as cannabinoid hemp. and that's a further discussion, another hour discussion. But cannabinoid hemp is what we're really interested in because of the medicinal qualities on it. But we really also need to really promote and embrace fiber hemp and seed hemp, and hemp seed as a food is a phenomenal thing. And being able to create hempcrete and plastics and even biofuels from hemp is something that is extremely important to us. And I really have an issue with clear cutting and logging and the mindless devastation of the forest when we can grow hemp for fiber to replace cellulose on the market. I want to go crazy over certain things, and that's one of them. So let's figure out ways to have hemp farming work together. I don't think that fiber and industrial hemp needs to be grown maybe in the same places that medicinal hemp is grown, and as a community, maybe we can create maps for that. So is there any questions in the audience that we had? I know we don't have time, but is there any other quick questions anyone had really quickly here?
And the necessary cultivation resulting without its use. Subsurface drip, what do you guys know of that use for hemp?
Did you catch that? Can you repeat the question?
Subsurface drip systems
Yeah.
for hemp, which would
So,
help alleviate.
Yeah, I'm relatively familiar.
And does it work? I mean, does it
Yeah,
function as well?
I got a friend in Greeley, Colorado that did 68 acres. I think there were 7 zones, all sub-irrigation using Netafim. It's a company that, right? So, I mean, the logic, the technology, if you can afford the $3,500 an acre or whatever it is to set it up, I mean, he's seen incredible success with it. It allows for the plant to achieve really the same successes. The idea is that they bury large pipes of sub-irrigated piping under the ground, and then the plants can go down, fetch the water through capillary action. It will rise, but it mitigates the weed pressure in a way because there isn't top-down watering. So, for example, one of the big problems with pivots is that you're watering your weeds just as much as you're watering your hemp, right? So if you're working with sub-irrigation, you're not giving the competitive advantage that weeds might have if they were, if they had access to the abundant amount of water. That said, it's a very mechanized farm, certified organic, 3 people harvest 68 acres. So it's not exactly your model for regeneration or necessarily that paradigm, but yeah.
And one other thing of as far as on no plastic film, to understand that there's still a lot of fossil fuel input for cultivation of an acre and the continued tractor work that's needed and additional people. So the energy embedded needs to be looked at as well, not just.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Just, we can do away with a lot of sub-irrigation if we are properly doing mulching and we're properly doing cover crops. We can really, and even tractor work, all of that can be really mitigated by, using more natural systems. And, we're going to have to wrap it up. I really thank you all for coming out today. This is an incredibly important topic. We've barely even scratched the surface on a multitude of issues that need to be discussed in hemp. And like Josh was saying earlier, this is cannabis. This is, an important plant that's here to save the planet. It's here to save communities. And I think that the more that we have these community discussions and the more that we work together as communities is the more that we can bring up the evolution of this plant and the evolution of our own species as humans on the planet. Thank you all so much for being here today.